I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. I'm joined today by the MP of New Brunswick Southwest, John Williamson. Thank you for being here today, John.
It's my pleasure. Happy New Year. I know it's almost, we're getting to the end of January, but it's a new year, and I think we're all looking forward to getting through winter and then another glorious spring.
And it's great to start the year off with a check-in on how things are going federally. And I say New Brunswick Southwest, but as we know, that name and the riding itself will change by April 2024.
So if the next federal election is after April 2024, we will most likely be running under a slightly changed map in New Brunswick Southwest, which will include St. John West, which is a large addition to this riding. Will not include York County except for McAdam. I'm potentially losing that area, but also gaining Burton around Fredericton. And I say potentially because there's still the final reports out from the independent commissioners. The maps are drawn for all 10 ridings in New Brunswick, but there's still one last, appeal process through Parliament, through one of the committees that changes can be proposed. So I'm not proposing any changes to the new federal riding, which could be called St. Croix St. John, but I am petitioning to retain the name New Brunswick Southwest because I think it's more accurate. Because a lot of people think this riding is really Charlotte County and now St. John West, but it actually extends as far as Sussex, Sunbury County, and areas around Gagetown. So it's Charlotte County is an important part of the riding. It's about half the current riding, but the new change kind of flattens my riding. But there's still a lot of territory that I think is better with the name New Brunswick Southwest.
And it'll gain about potentially 10,000 more voters. Is that correct?
That is right. So right now I have a largely rural riding, about 10,000 square kilometers. But I represent about 68,000 people. With the addition of Burton and St. John West, and even the losing York County. And I must say, I am kind of sad to lose York County because I've represented it for some time now, and I know the area well. But because the population of this province is moving south, as I said, my riding is kind of flattening out. But with the additions, the representation will jump to about 80,000 people, and the average size of the riding in New Brunswick should be about 78,000. So I'm a little over the average, but I mean it's very, very close, and so it will be a little bit different. I'll have less geography to cover, which can be a good thing. Still a lot because I've got 4 islands and a lot of territory, but I'll have a few more. I'll have about 10,000 more people to represent in Parliament.
Now I think it was August. I was there at the Federal Electoral Boundaries Commission. They actually held a hearing here at the W.C. O'Neill Arena. You were there, Kathy Baucus, Mayor Brad Henderson of St. Andrews spoke, and Deputy Mayor of McAdam, Taylor Gallant spoke.
Yes.
Proposing to keep McAdam in this riding, and obviously they listened. So it is interesting to see that you can make a difference by saying your piece. There weren't a lot of people. I always use these as educational moments. There weren't a lot of people in the audience, so I like voters to know that these things do happen, and anyone can come and be a part of it.
Well, that's right. So let's try. I'll talk about McAdam, but in the context of the St. John change has been a little bit controversial because a city that has had one member of parliament is being split and will have 2. Now, my view is that's actually going to strengthen the representation around St. John and southern New Brunswick. But there has been this peculiar view in New Brunswick that each city should have its own member of parliament. I think that's a bit odd because members of parliament don't represent cities. We represent voters and constituents. And members of parliament should never be seen as kind of an echo chamber of City Hall. We represent people and families. And yet, in New Brunswick, a lot of the municipalities have been saying we want one MP. The commissioners, independent commissioners, these rules are not set by, or these boundaries are not set by politicians. decided that no, St. John is going to be split along the St. John River. Again, I think because there's just so much population now in the south. The east side of St. John will be joined with Rothesay, which it's currently part of, as well as Quispam, and West St. John is going to come into New Brunswick Southwest. And there was opposition to that at the meeting in Rothesay, but the commissioners decided to note they're going to maintain their first proposal, split the city, 2 MPs. Macadam is the other option. Macadam was going to go into Tobique-Mactaquac in the north, stay with the rest of York County, but the mayor of Macadam, who did address the commission virtually at a subsequent meeting, along with the deputy mayor and the MLA and several other mayors in the area, argued no, Macadam should stay in with the southern areas because for local services, Macadam works with St. Stephen, St. Andrews, and now what is Eastern Charlotte, not with Harvey and some municipalities in York County, even though Macadam's in York County. Plus, Macadam, with its long history on the rail yards, is working closely with the Port of St. John in West St. John, which is growing at a rapid pace, and all those trains run through Macadam. So there's a lot of good cultural as well as economic reasons for Macadam to stay linked to New Brunswick Southwest, and the commissioners reversed themselves. They heard enough testimony and I think good reasons. So in the end, they overruled their own first decision and kept Macadam in Southwest. And I think it makes a lot of sense because the MLA, Kathy Baucus, represents Western Charlotte along with Macadam. When people from Macadam are looking for government service, they come down to Service New Brunswick or Service Canada, and my office is there as well. And it would be odd if they had to come down for that, but then came to my office and said, I'm sorry, you need to go see your member of parliament in Tobique-Mactaquac. And it's not that we don't like to serve people who don't live in our ridings, but every MP has, in my case now, 80,000 members or voters or citizens. I need to focus my resources on the people I serve. So I'm very pleased that Macadam is staying in New Brunswick Southwest because the ties between our communities are so strong. And culturally, even though Macadam is in York County, it really does feel like a part of Charlotte County. Your station covers it, as does St. Croix Courier. So it makes a lot of sense. But that just shows how the process, I think, does work. The commissioners listened, and when local support said, well, you might not have gotten this right, they weren't afraid to change their decisions. So I'll continue to represent Macadam, and I look forward to that.
And when you're talking about St. John West, why do you think that makes sense as part of the riding to include that much more of St. John?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we might lose track of this here in Charlotte County, but again, this riding, New Brunswick Southwest, also includes Granby Westfield, the Belle Isle, Opahock, and even Lepreau and Macy's Bay. When these people think of a commercial center, they go into St. John, particularly Granby, Westfield, and all those communities around. So again, the orientation of a good, like tens of thousands of voters in this riding is towards St. John for services. So that works as well, where the focus of voters in that area is very much on St. John. Plus, I think, like I've already been working on issues with the Port of St. John because of the border hour reductions in Vanceboro, which is not at this moment having impact on train scheduling, but it could if the number of routes, the number of crossings increase, which we're expecting. So I've been working with MP Wayne Long on this, with some of the Liberal cabinet ministers. So to me, to strengthen those ties makes sense. And plus I like St. John. I think it's a great city. I travel through it often to get to places like Opahock and other areas in the east end of the riding, because it's faster to kind of take Route 1 than it is to go through some of the other routes that I could take. So I'm through St. John frequently, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to get to know voters there better, to show them how I think I can represent them, and potentially do so after the next election, if it falls after April 2024. If the election is before that, we run under the existing boundaries. So I continue to serve the voters in York County, and that's not going to change. I mean, that is my focus. I am starting to get into St. John West, but really my job right now is to represent all the voters in New Brunswick Southwest. And after the next election, that could change.
That's very interesting. I think of the areas we cover here at CHCO as sort of the intersection of the New Brunswick Southwest riding and the St. Croix riding, so it'll make my job more interesting too. You touched on the train route between St. John and McAdam, and then that argument was made by you and also Mayor Stanix in the summer as far as people that are following the closure of the Vanceboro. I mean, obviously that's on the American side. There's not much we can do but make a case for it. But is that definitely something you're seeing, that route's becoming busier? Which
absolutely. I mean, you can see the stories that are coming out of the Port St. John. The volume, they are exceeding numbers at a faster rate than anyone thought possible. They are growing by leaps and bounds, and with that. I think the opportunity for more freight is going to be there. I mean, as you know, COVID has changed some of the economics, not only within North America, but around the world. Companies are nearshoring, onshoring. The port in St. John is an ice-free harbor. It can be accessed year-round. It's a deep-water port, and given its location, it can access both the large New England market, but as well Toronto and St. John, and Toronto and Montreal, and it's doing just that. It has established shipping contracts to deliver freight into Montreal as well as Toronto, and the volume of rail is impressive, and it's going to keep growing.
And so to have two MPs really representing St. John could be, in your opinion, to the benefit of a route that's as busy as that.
Look, I think it's going to benefit both southern New Brunswick and St. John because of the growth of the population, and I think the economic strength of the region. For years, I've joked that Oppahawk, a small community just outside of Sussex, is the best represented area in my riding because I share Oppahawk with MP Rob Moore from Fundy Royal. So on Canada Day, it's not unusual to see both Rob and me at the Oppahawk, the small but well-attended Canada Day. But as well, whenever Oppahawk had a file before Ottawa for community or infrastructure funding, their local representatives would come to see me as well as Rob Moore. So you had two members pushing their files to the federal government. St. John's going to find itself, I think, in the same situation where they'll have two members of Parliament who are now working on infrastructure projects for the city, as well as projects around the port of St. John. The funding for the port expansions began under the last Conservative government, and it continued under the current Liberal government. I think it's such an important piece of infrastructure for the province. You're going to see members working together to ensure that it receives the attention from the federal government. Because look, no one thinks it's bad that Toronto has the voices it has in Parliament, or Vancouver, or Calgary. So to give a city like St. John another voice in Parliament, I think will be beneficial. Now, I want to be clear to my voters represent now. This is not going to take away from the work that I've been doing. My office is open to help constituents with files or challenges they're having with the federal government. But when it comes to pushing, promoting projects, St. John will be part of my mix now, because right now with the new municipalities we have in New Brunswick, I represent 17 municipalities in New Brunswick Southwest. After April 2024, when this riding changes, that number will fall to 15. So just to give you a sense, so there'll be some changes, but again, it's one I'm looking forward to, and it's one I think is going to be beneficial to southern New Brunswick.
Now I'm going to pivot and talk about some work that's being done in Ottawa right now. Can you speak to the latest on Bill C-21?
So yeah, there are a couple of very contentious bills before Parliament. C-21 is the federal government, the Liberal government's attempt to pass some kind of gun control legislation. Now, for years, we have been told, Canadians have been told, this is not about everyday long guns that Canadians use for hunting. And that seemed to be where the Liberals were going on this. Now, there was still a lot of opposition to Bill C-21 from sport shooters and people that legally owned handgun, because that's part of the bill as well. But in the end of the last year, the Liberals made some significant changes to that bill, which I think surprised not only hunters across the country, but also the Liberals, their political allies in Parliament, the NDP. The amendments will ban long guns that are used by everyday hunters. And so there is a ton of political opposition coming from Canadians, but also interesting, in the last couple of weeks, the NDP has signaled they are going to withdraw their support for C-21 because they too believe the changes the Liberals made won't do anything to reduce gun crimes or gun violence in this country, particularly in our cities, and wrongly target law-abiding hunters and ranchers across the country. The government's got a real problem now because, as you know, the Liberals are a minority and they need another party to support their bills to get them through Parliament. So the committee now, I think, is going to be going back and studying this, because this was handled poorly. The committee had been studying the original C-21, which was already controversial. Then, as those witnesses were done, that is when they tabled amendments. I mean, they listed thousands of long guns that could be banned and a whole new classification after we'd heard from witnesses. But it has been so controversial, there's going to be now more hearings coming up, and but the government's got a problem. They don't have the votes right now to get it through Parliament. That's a problem for them. I think I'm glad the NDP withdrew their support, because this bill goes too far. The problem in gun violence and gun crime in this country needs to be addressed by going after criminals, lawbreakers, gun smugglers. It's not about making life more difficult for law-abiding ranchers and firearm enthusiasts and hunters across the country, and that is exactly what the Liberals are doing. So in your opinion, what would be the solution? Well, that's up for the government to look. I actually think that I think when we were in office, we had the balance right. To get a handgun in this country is already very, very difficult, and those that have a permit to have a handgun have been vetted by the RCMP and trained. Similarly for long guns, there's already to own a hunting rifle in this country, you have to go through a course, then apply for a license. You're then vetted by the RCMP, and then you're sent a license that allows Canadians to use a long gun for hunting. The problem in this country is illegal gun smuggling, illegal gun use, and I think increasingly a criminal justice system that doesn't hold people accountable for the misuse of firearms. And we are seeing too many stories in the last couple of weeks and months of people using the firearm in the commission of a crime, then getting out on bail and committing another crime with a firearm. I think we need to hold people responsible when they use a gun illegally, as opposed to letting them out and then going after, which is what the Liberals are doing, law-abiding firearm owners. Law-abiding firearm owners are always going to follow the rules, and adding more rules to them is not going to solve crime in some of our cities. So we need to focus on the problem, and the problem is not duck hunters and sport shooters. Now, another controversial bill would be C-11, which has to do with the Broadcasting Act. And even as someone who works in broadcasting, I've been following it, but it feels like it's been ongoing for quite some time now. Where are things at with that? I think it feels that way because, again, another very controversial bill, which we're seeing internet provider and companies around the world, particularly in the United States, saying this is going to give the federal government power to control what's on the internet. And I know there's some parts of that bill which have broad support, but the focus on the CRTC and the federal government regulating what's on the internet in terms of information, or what can be called misinformation, is proving to be very controversial, particularly with younger Canadians who who turn to the internet first and foremost for information, and news as well as information, and so this bill is going through Parliament, I think, slowly, because it is so controversial, and we'll see where in this Parliament the government needs at least one other party to support it, but it's a bill that I think is going to have real implications on the ability to access information freely online. And for people that think this bill is a good idea because the Liberals are in power, they should ask themselves, would I feel the same way if a Conservative government was proposing this bill? Because once the bill is in place, now if it passes, I believe we should repeal it, because I don't think Ottawa should be determining what information is available online, or prioritizing some news services over another. Look, I recognize the internet can be a place where misinformation can be spread, and there are credible news sources and those that are less credible. But again, do we want the state to be regulating that? I don't think that's the answer. I think we have to ensure that our journalists can do the job that they've signed up to do, and that information. I think if there's bad information out there, the solution is for government to try to suppress information. It's to expose it with good information. I've always believed that, and that's I think the orientation we need in a country, in a free and democratic society.
I feel like we'll definitely get to touch on that topic again in a couple of months from now. Another controversial topic that I think Canada has the world spotlight on is medical assistance in dying, or as it's known, MAID.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the issues and concerns that are happening in Ottawa right now? So
this is another big topic that I think is going to really seize Parliament for a number of reasons. First, MAID, as it's known, medically assisted suicide, is subject to parliamentary review. So that is something that's happening. On top of that, the Liberals, wrongly I think, are now suggesting or advocating that assisted suicide be extended to people with mental health challenges. These are, the MAID originally was about people that have life-ending ailments, and as an alternative for them to go to assisted suicide as opposed to living through that. Very narrow, opening up to mental health, I think, is a Pandora's box, because mental health can, first of all, it's not life-threatening, and it can change. People who are not well can become well with help and treatment and love from family and friends. So this, I think, and of course, people could make a decision when they're in a dark place, but with MAID, there'd be no coming back from that if someone were to. So it hasn't happened yet, but it's what the Liberals are proposing. I hope they pull back. I hope Canadians express opposition to this as well vocally. Parliament's going to be reviewing it, and there'll be an opportunity for that to happen. And then, of course, the third part of MAID, which is proving to be controversial, is how I think it's being misused. We've heard of the horrific stories of Veterans Affairs suggesting to some veterans who are either not able to access services, or who again are in a tough spot, a difficult spot with either physical or mental illnesses, that perhaps they should consider MAID. Now, the government says that was not the intent, but it has happened, and it shows the slippery slope that we're on. And without kind of iron guardrails, this is the challenge with MAID. So I think before we start expanding it, let's fix it so it gets back to the core that it was meant to deal with, not kind of going off in new directions, as we already see the legislation that's currently in place has really caused some problems. Look, we're hearing now with food insecurity and housing insecurity, some Canadians and some, this is not, it's not to say it's everywhere, but we're hearing stories now. People are asking about MAID because they feel they can't get housing they have food insecurities, or in some cases they're not able to get the medical treatment that they should be getting in the Medicare system. So I say let's focus on those problems as opposed to making it easier for people to just turn to medically assisted death because they're in a hard spot right now.
I know that I was reading an article this weekend that said that Canada has the most organ donations because of MAID. But that the flip side was was to look at the numbers. How many people are choosing this option, and should we look more closely at the program?
Yeah, like to me, I think that is that's a ghoulish stat. Look, we can also turn to reports that show how medically assisted suicide will save the healthcare money because people are no longer accessing it for cancer treatment or for end of life care. That's why I am very skeptical. I should say I am very skeptical about MAID to begin with. I would prefer to see society and this country focus more on care and helping people cope with serious ailments. I think the door now has been swung far too open on this practice, and I am very opposed to both extending it, particularly for mental health. I think it's a culture change that we want to be very, very cautious about because of the implications where people are making decisions based on economic grounds, not on quality of life grounds. And I think it's good we're having a conversation through Parliament about it. I've had people asking me how they can weigh in on it. There's really two ways that through my office people have opinions on MAID on both sides. I mean, I've given you my opinion, broadly speaking, but I look forward to hearing from all constituents about where they're at on it. And of course, there'll be a process through Parliament and the government where people can send testimony directly to those groups to weigh in on it, which will be considered by the government and parliamentarians.
Well, and I'm sure we can check in on this topic again
it's
in
not
2 months when you're back.
Yeah.
I thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to sitting down with you again soon to talk about more issues.
You're welcome. The time always goes so quickly, but I look forward to coming back soon, Vicki. So thank you, and again, Happy New Year to you and your audience.
Thank you. My guest today has been MP John Williamson of New Brunswick Southwest. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.